I would be amazed if they haven't all started talks by this time next month. Because if they haven't, then it's like, well, clearly the club don't want any of these players to stay.
It wouldn't be a Blood Red podcast if I wasn't asking you about Mo Salah and his contract. Yesterday, I mean, kind of the message that he sent out, it felt like maybe it was a bit misunderstood. I mean, he kind of was stating the obvious that he is out of contract, and as it stands, this will be his last Premier League game at Old Trafford for Liverpool. Do you think that was a clever move from Salah, maybe putting a bit of pressure on the club after a great performance?
It was exactly the same as what he said before the game. So it's like, what is the new cycle here for us journalists? It's like, everyone forgot what he said 3 days earlier? So I know we have 24-hour news channels, sports news channels and everything, but come on. So people just seem surprised that he'd said it. It's like, well, yeah, he's just stating the obvious. What you might say is what you've just said, is he putting a little bit on the club? And it's not just him, is it? There's obviously Van Dijk and Trent, who are both out of contract at the end of the season. And I wrote something saying, look, transfer window's over. They go through the first games, new managers in, sporting directors in now. There's no excuse to not start looking at these 3 contracts now properly and going, right, we're not giving you one. Right, you can have this. All right, we'd like you to have this. And I'm sure we could all have our own guesses as to what we think might happen or what we want to happen. But the way things have gone now, I think it's more now on the player in terms of the powers with the player. Obviously, we don't have to sign a couple, but also it's more in their court than the club's now, I think, because the club, for whatever reason, as said before, it was a bit of a hospital pass for Richard Hughes, wasn't it, that he was given this, sign all these players, move these on, oh, by the way, there's in 3 contracts, you need to sort this out. So he's had to go through more one by one. I mean, we don't know exactly what's been going on behind the scenes, but we can only go off what the 3 of them have been saying and the noises they've been making. And we said it in the podcast on Friday that all 3 of them seem to have not been offered an official deal yet. So I will be amazed.
Van Dijk and
Van Dijk
Salah definitely
said it. Yeah, I will be amazed if they haven't all started talks by this time next month. Because if they haven't, then it's like, well, clearly the club don't want any of these players to stay. Will be the message that an awful lot of people, including me, and including the pair of you, would I'm assuming, would you? Would you agree with saying that's what it seems like?
Yeah,
I
mean,
absolutely
you start to wonder what is the hold up.
Exactly.
Especially
what else is on
it's one thing to say they've agreed a contract, but they have to have started some kind of negotiations or reached out to representatives or said, look, this is ideally what we want. What do you want? Because say, for example, argument's sake, devil's advocate, they go, Trent, right, do you want a 4-year contract? And he says, no, I'm leaving. And no matter what they say, he says he's leaving. Then it's like, well, fine. Whereas you could say with the others, you go, Mo, here's a 12-month contract. Do you want to sign it? Then he's got something to think about. So they are the discussions they have to start inside the next. They simply have to. And if they don't, then clearly the message, for me anyway, is that we're not going forward with, I think, is Van Dijk 32 or 33 now?
So Van Dijk's 33 now,
and Salah's 32, and Trent's 25 or 26?
25,
yeah,
Trent.
25. So we're going forward next season without these 3 players.
Certainly, and especially as that January the 1st kind of, the transfer window opens, it means they can sign pre-contract agreements that open talks with other clubs overseas. So that just kind of opens a whole can of worms, doesn't it, at that stage of the season?
It does, yeah. I mean, it seems Van Dijk is probably the one that you're least concerned about. Salah seems to be very relaxed about it all, and Trent is the one that you'd be slightly worried about now, I think, because there's no doubt that Real Madrid would be sniffing around. They've just taken Kylian Mbappe on a free, so there'd be nothing to stop them thinking they can't get Trent Alexander-Arnold on a free. He's determined not to have this issue sort of played out in public. That's been the sort of information that we've had from a few people now over the last couple of months. And that's all fair enough. Obviously, it's Doyle club. Very delicate situation. Doesn't want to be seen to be disrespectful or, certain people suggesting things to the media that might come out or whatever else. So I think that's all fine. But at some stage, you'd like to see a little bit of movement and some resolution at some stage. We know these things tend to happen quite fast, but I'm with Doyle. I'd be amazed if Richie Hughes isn't now tasked with resolving those 3. the top of his to-do list. I look at things sort of in isolation, and you wonder why prioritising a goalkeeper for next summer has seemed to really have taken precedence over bringing in a number 6 or sorting the contracts of these players, and it seemed like that should have been like quite far down the to-do list on the Richard Hughes' in tray. But now with the transfer window shut, they've got no more issues to resolve around that until January. So, what can you do as a sporting director? You can sort of plan longer, wider strategy for the club in terms of best practices or whatever. I don't know, but those contract issues aren't going away, are they? And the longer it goes on, the more twitchy fans will get, and understandably so. So let's hopefully see some movement for at least one of them in the next couple of weeks or months.
This is the same as like Adrian last year and before that, Milner and Firmino, who were kind of hanging around going, well, we're going to get offered a contract deal or not, because none of those are regular starters. These are 3 key players for Liverpool. Captain, vice-captain, best player. So this has to get sorted as soon as possible. And I think everybody has to be kind of grown up about it. If they come out and say, I am leaving at the end of the season for whatever reason, say, for example, Salah goes, I'm going to go to Saudi Arabia, if they all agree, we're going to say this now, because there's been no suggestion from any of the 3 players, the fact that they've all had really good starts to the season, that they're being distracted by it. And my belief is that the longer this goes on, the more chance there is that they'll be distracted. Just the way it is.
Yeah.
I think people might be a bit upset if one of them says, I'm leaving at the end of the season. But I think they'll get over it pretty soon, especially if the team keeps on winning and they're still doing, they're still playing really well. I think that serves the best interests of everybody. So as long as it doesn't go on for too long, people reach decisions as soon as they can. The other thing is these players are under no obligation to come up with decisions as soon as possible. They can basically, the power I said before is with them. They can do what they like, really. But my personal view is, if you know you're going to go, just let everybody know. If you want to stay, the club needs to get a move on and offer contracts.
Yeah, I spoke to John Aldridge as part of his Echo column earlier this morning, and he come up with a great line. He said the club and FSG are looking to play poker with 3 players who've all got royal flushes, and that was a great way of summing it up, I think. Salah is an interesting one because he's the highest paid player at the club, the highest paid player of all time, but he's going to be 33 by the time that next season starts. So are they concerned about him dropping off? Is there going to be are they worried that his performances are going to completely fall off a cliff? That is a fair assessment to make for a player who is of his age, but I think Salah's a bit of a special case, a bit of a unique player who keeps himself in such good nick, such dedication to improvement and to fitness and recovery and all that sort of stuff, that he could probably play close to his 40s.
I mean, Jamie Carragher said the same.
I was about to say, yeah, Carragher said something along those lines yesterday. And players are playing, top players are playing longer these days. It's not like it was maybe 15, 20, 25 years ago where players started looking at calling time when they got to 32, 33. I think that they're fitter than ever. They're keeping themselves in better nick during the summer months. And look at Salah's decision over the summer to swear playing in the Olympics with Egypt for a good, solid pre-season under slot. And, we're only 3 games in, but it's already looked to have paid off handsomely. And I think he's still got a good 2, 3, maybe even 4 years at this level. And, if he has, for those not to be spent at Liverpool would be a massive disappointment, I think. To say the least.
So I think the club are going to have to accept the fact they're never going to get a fee for Salah now. That's gone, right? If he does sign a contract, I'd be amazed if it's anything more than 12 months. And I think,
do you think they'd do a 2-year?
No, I think if they do 12 months, I think that serves the interests of everybody, because if he just starts to have a drop off, then Liverpool aren't paying him for too long when he's kind of losing his way, and it still gives Salah that option at the end of the season to go, well, yeah, I fancy going now, and Liverpool get another season out of him. They're not going to get a fee for him now, as far as I'm concerned.
But with Salah, I mean, you look around and there's every team in Europe would take Salah. His performance yesterday was incredible, but it feels like there isn't a market for him. I mean, Saudi Arabia feels like it's been and gone.
Yeah.
No, I think Saudi Arabia hasn't been and gone. I think that's where he'll end up.
But I just think in the way he's playing, we know how hungry he is for success. The kind of the model professional he is. I just can't see him at 32, 33 going and saying, I'm going to play in this bit part, NAF League. I understand the kind of cultural aspect of it. Then, okay, maybe a few years ago you might have had Real Madrid knocking in, obviously just signed Kylian Mbappe, that rules out. PSG, another one who've maybe been linked in the past, they've kind of gone away from that Galactico paying big money for star players. They've kind of gone for a more cohesive approach. So it's kind of...
Barcelona haven't got any money.
Yeah, exactly. So you kind of, as you go, down the list, he's not going to go and sign for City, is he?
The options are few for them, aren't they, to be fair? And that was one of the things that he sort of privately communicated when his contract was coming up a couple of years ago, was that he had no intention of signing for another English club. So once you rule that out, if that still is the case,
it feels like it's Liverpool or Saudi Arabia, really.
Well, don't forget, there's also a bit of a sense of, with all three of these players going, let's see what this new manager's like. And I think sometimes people forget that. And given the fact they've all started so well and the team started so well, and obviously the caveats that we mentioned already in this podcast, is that perhaps another month and then they see how they start in the Champions League and they see how we go when they start rotating players, gives them a better idea. Maybe that's what they're waiting for. Certainly Salah, to a lesser extent Van Dijk, and I think it probably does count for Trent as well, actually.
Yeah. I think Liverpool's issue is, having to maybe even increase Salah's wage for a player who's at the age he is. But, I mean, they've lost some high earners in the last year or so, haven't they? Firmino was big. Henderson, obviously. Thiago was up there with Van Dijk, sort of just below Salah. So the wage bill shouldn't really be too much of an issue. So I don't think they can really hide behind that as maybe an excuse for not offering three of the best players extensions, because the money theoretically at least should be there.
And I suppose with a contract, people will say, well, Salah's proved it, but in Liverpool they'll be saying we're paying for what we're going to get over the next 2 years rather than what's just happened over the last three.
Yeah.
But
which is why you gave him a 1-year contract.
Well, exactly. And I suppose, if they could do a similar kind of thing what they did before, where it's kind of heavily incentivised, and they say, look, if you think you're going to perform, you'll get the money you deserve, kind of thing.
I think if you're going to incentivise it with Salah, it would be based on not so much gold. I always hate it when it's based on gold, because then you open for appearances and team trophies and success. I think is what I'd want anything incentivised.
Tell you what, if you're getting a clean sheet bonus at Liverpool, though, you've earned a few balls in the season.
Be a nice international break for a few of those. But as you say, Van Dijk feels like a contract that might just. It feels like I think you said Gorst, one that hopefully you'll sort yourself out. It feels like the most kind of straightforward one to do.
It does, yeah. But on the flip side, you wouldn't want to overly neglect that too much. He is the club captain after all. Every club in Europe would want him lining up as their centre-back as well. So, yeah, I mean, they've got a lot of plates spinning here, and it's difficult to not take your eye off one, isn't it, with the other one still there. So, yeah, loads of work to do for Richard Hughes and or Michael Edwards in the next, days, weeks, hours. They need to get on it sooner or later.
It won't be
But if you look at the way Liverpool have worked under FSG, who was it? Emre Can, Wijnaldum, Thiago, Milner, Keita, Oxlade-Chamberlain, Firmino, Matip. They've just let them go down to the end of the contracts because they've gone, well, you've done really well for us. We've got everything we want out of you. Bye, kind of thing.
No.
But I think the three players who are there, even with, the caveats of someone like Firmino and, still had a lot to give, I think these three are in a different sort of, sphere to the players we just mentioned.
They don't have some resale value. I mean, I know you say that Liverpool won't get a fee for Salah if they were to do a 12 months, but it feels like even with Van Dijk, if he was to get a couple of years, even in a year, he feels like you could recoup some money back, doesn't it? Trent, obviously, if you were to give him a 5-year deal and in 2 years he wanted to go, you'd obviously get a huge fee for him. So it feels like, whereas those players that you said before, Firmino, as you say, it's probably the right time for him to leave, wasn't it? Emre Can is a difficult one. Wijnaldum, again, a bit of a weird one, but it feels like even if they didn't fulfil their contracts at Liverpool, their value would be protected somewhat, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I mean, maybe not so much with Van Dijk because he'll be 34 only by the start of next season. But again, that goes back to keeping themselves in top nick and defenders, particularly if they're not expending too much energy, which Liverpool's style at the moment is helpful towards that. Means that he can play, another couple of years at least. He's looked good this season.
Absolutely. Well, the transfer window might have closed, but it certainly won't be a quiet international break at Liverpool, I wouldn't suspect.